Part 2. Heaven and Earth in Biblical Cosmology. Chapter 5. Heaven and Earth, a spiritual perspective. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Due to the glaring discrepancy between modern and ancient worldview, it is necessary to rely exclusively on traditional cosmology to interpret the meaning of the heaven and earth in the Bible. When considered from an ancient human perspective, the words heaven and earth refer to the two halves of the cosmos. This polarity completely encompasses reality, which makes it the secondary cause of all manifestation. In other words, everything in this universe was made from a combination of heavenly and earthly components. In this respect, biblical cosmology is similar to our materialistic worldview, which tends to describe all phenomena as a combination of matter and energy. However, it would be a mistake to imagine that Earth is exactly the equivalent of matter as understood by contemporary physics, and it would be an even greater mistake to think that heaven is the equivalent of energy. In the Bible, raw earth refers to matter without meaning, and pure heaven refers to spiritual meanings without corporeal existence. As strange as this duality may seem to modern sensibilities, this way of framing reality is the self-evident from the spiritual perspective because it directly addresses the following questions. What does it mean? And what spiritual truth does it embody? So, it is no surprising that the basic polarity of this cosmology is meanings and matter. Conversely, the materialistic perspective has developed its model of the universe in the response to the following questions. What is it made of? And how does it work? So, it is not surprising that materialism's fundamental duality is matter and energy. With wisdom, the Word founded the earth. With understanding, He established the heavens with His knowledge. The depths we split, and the skies dropped the dew. Proverbs 3:19. According to the spiritual worldview, the whole in universe can be described in terms of the intercourse between heaven and earth. This joining of spiritual and corporeal realities, called knowledge, is the most fundamental notion in biblical cosmology. In fact, every single phenomenon can be interpreted according to this pattern. As illustrated in the diagram above, the union of heaven and earth involves a dual interaction in which the heavens cover the earth and the earth supports the heavens. One end, spiritual reality informs corporeal reality with meaning and purpose. On the other end, matter expresses spirit by making it visible and tangible in the universe. These fundamental interactions will be discussed at the length throughout this commentary, and the notion of knowledge will be illustrated with many examples from the Bible. Chapter 6. The universe as a language. In the beginning, God created the heaven, spiritual reality, and the earth, corporeal reality. From a material perspective, the universe resembles a gigantic machine composed of the meaningless matter and mindless energy. This worldview has little to do with the spiritual perspective, which likens the universe to a written language. Divine breath becomes word and light. The earth was confused and a meaningless darkness was on the face of the deep, and the breath of God. However, over the face of the waters, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. From the spiritual perspective, creation is viewed as the manifestation of divine language. Therefore, to understand the book of Genesis and its ancient cosmology, we must posit a universe founded on meaning and language instead of mindless mechanical causality. Thankfully, there is an easy way to emulate this perspective using an analogy with our written language. To fully appreciate this analogy, it is important to realize that written words are the union of physical marks, shown at the bottom of the following image, and abstract meaning. Because of this union, the marks of the written word support the breath of the spoken word. These linguistic components perfectly represent the corporeal and spiritual interactions discussed in the previous chapter. As illustration below, it takes levels upon levels of organization to form a meaningful sentence from a jumble of marks. The result is the physical construction, the written word capable of encoding the events of our world within the confines of this page. Miraculously, by ordering these marks with the technical laws of our language, alphabet, vocabulary, and grammar, they point to a relatively higher reality. Thus, a real but invisible connection is established between those physical marks and a universe that reaches far beyond the limits of this page. In the biblical cosmology, the entire universe operates according to this paradigm, except at a higher level. In that case, instead of ordering marks on a page to encode a fact, a divine language organizes facts and events in the world to embody metaphysical truths. Thus, concrete reality is arranged by the cosmic laws of the language and then infused with spiritual meaning. Of course, in order to accept the possibility of such a cosmic language, we must forego the materialistic assumption that facts are completely devoid of spiritual meaning. Otherwise, the words on this page can be nothing more than ink marks, and reality itself can be nothing more than insignificant atoms and molecules. The gap that separates ancient cosmology from materialistic science is enormous. On one hand, we may interpret reality exclusively with mechanical causality, where everything is devoid of meaning and the higher purpose. On the other hand, we may interpret reality exclusively through a cosmic language, where facts and events are the hosts of spiritual meaning. Neither of these worldviews is complete without the other. A purely material perspective knows how the universe works, but perspectives no higher reason for its existence. While a purely spiritual perspective knows the meaning of the universe without understanding how it technically works. Ideally, we should be able to adopt both perspectives without having to sacrifice one or the other. Chapter 7. Symbolism and the Spiritual Worldview. In the beginning, God created the heaven, spiritual meaning, and the earth, physical expression. In biblical cosmology, the world was created by a union of heaven and earth, where the first is the source of spiritual meaning, and the second is the source of physical expression. Thus, everything in this universe is analogous to a written word in a divine language. These cosmic words will be referred to as symbols in the language of creation, where a symbol is simply a fact that embodies higher truths. This metaphysical framework implies a universe where all events may be interpreted as both factual and meaningful at the same time, possessing concrete reality as well as spiritual significance. Another important characteristic of the spiritual perspective is its tendency to describe the universe in the terms of microcosms. This means creation is perceived as a series of embedded representation of its cosmic principles. It also means that each part of the universe can reflect a miniature version of the whole. The diagram above illustrates our first example of a microscope in this case. The fundamental structure of the written word is analogous to the fundamental structure of the universe. In the macrocosm, the universe is composed of intangible heaven supported by tangible earth. Similarly, in the microcosm, the written word is a composite of intangible meaning supported by tangible marks. In biblical cosmology, this type of analogy is not interpreted as a metaphor. Rather, it is seen as a translation of cosmic influences on the smaller scales. For instance, the Mosaic law itself was regarded as the translation of cosmic language into a more specific human language. Similarly, the various miracles or sins described in the Bible are meant to be interpreted as a microcosmic symbols, representations of the cosmic patterns at the human scale. As an important example of this concept, the separation of the Red Sea by Moses may be interpreted as a miniature version of the separation of the primordial waters by God. Moses stretched his hand on the sea, and God made the sea into dry land, and the water we divided. Compare Genesis 1:6-13 and Exodus 14:16-22. In general, all the miraculous powers of Moses are miniature versions of God's powers in the creation. Even beyond such as miracles, every single event in the Bible should be interpreted as a representation of the cosmic principles on the human scale. Of course, this type of interpretation is completely foreign to materialism because the only acceptable form of explanation is mechanical causality. Conversely, from a spiritual perspective, explaining a miracle with mechanical causality would be the equivalent of detailing the steps required to construct a written word with marks, which is hardly relevant at all.